Hello and welcome. Today we're speaking to Tony D'Alberto. Tony's a career race car driver in the Australian auto scene and has a fantastic story to tell about his journey from go-karts to V8 Supercars and beyond.
Let's jump into it.
With 30 years experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, Precar Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies and original equipment manufacturers. Please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
Thanks very much for joining us tonight. It's great to have you on the show. To kick things off, can you tell us about your racing background and how you got into it?
It's been a long journey. So I'm 37 now, and I started go-karting when I was 7 years old. And it all sort of kicked off. My dad was doing a little bit of car race or go-karting himself, and he used to just basically take me to the track and see if I enjoyed it, if I liked it. And it was pretty much just a bit of a hobby back then. And it sort of progressed from there, and it got to the point where it was a bit difficult for Dad to be running a business, preparing the go-karts, racing himself, doing everything like that, meanwhile having other kids as well. So Dad sort of was quite happy to give up his driving and just focus on my racing. And from that moment in go-karting, I sort of progressed and started to, get a lot better, and got to the point where we sort of started taking it a little bit more seriously, and we're traveling all over the country, competing in state titles and national titles, and doing really well. And it sort of got to the point when I think I was 15. It was like a point there where it was like we're either going to keep going with this or we're going to sort of give it away, and we either take it to the next level, which would be, going into circuit racing and cars, or we just stay doing a bit of go-karting. And at that point, as a young driver, I probably didn't think it was possible to make a career out of it. You sort of probably dream of it, but you sort of think it's a very steep climb. But, we were brave enough, I suppose, to take that jump, and we went into Formula Ford, and we ran our own team. We sort of always ran our own go-karts from the start as well, preparing them all. And then we ran our own Formula Ford team and just progressed from there into supercars and I suppose the career that I have now. So it all came back to Dad and his brothers having a passion for motorsport. And, I was just a lucky one that got to do the racing when we got to a point, I suppose, where we could probably afford to go car racing.
So how would you describe the sport and the dynamics? So just hearing what you're saying, Tony, it's very much the story of a Formula One driver. They start in go-karts and this journey through other open-wheelers. They're tricky to drive open-wheelers, and then you switch into a hard like a sports sedan style and V8 Supercar. So there's 2 different styles there. So how would you best describe the sport and the dynamics of the sport?
It's a very tricky and political sport. I guess you got to try and navigate your way through the different categories, work out who's working for you, who's working against you, because at the end of the day it is a competition. And although you lean on people for help and guidance along the way, there's also ulterior motives. So that's why we always sort of chose to do our own thing and look after our own destiny. But I think car racing is a tricky one because it's so equipment based, and I think people don't quite understand that. So it's so crucial to get the right equipment to be able to show what you can do. And without that equipment and the right package, you could be the best driver in the world, have the best skills, but you can't show it. So that's a real challenge in motorsport, to get yourself in the right environment, right situation, right equipment at the right time when you're ready to perform, and to be able to get results. So it's some people make it, other people sort of don't get that opportunity, and I've sort of been lucky enough to be in some really, really good spots at times to have some great opportunities as well. So, especially now in my career driving for the teams that I drive for, that wouldn't have been possible if we weren't able to showcase what we could do earlier on in life. So it's you always feel like you're always proving yourself. And I think in like car racing, every lap that you do is recorded. So you have a lap time so people can see how you're going. Whereas other industries, well, the sports, you might have a bad quarter or something in a football game, but you're not judged, by a lap time or a timesheet like we are in car racing. So there's a lot of eyes on you all the time. And I suppose learning to deal with that pressure and that expectation all the time is something that you do become accustomed to when you grow up. But I think coming into it at such a young age, you do, become comfortable with that.
Tony, how demanding is the sport? You often hear about you needing to be fit and do a lot of training, and do you have to watch your weight? All these things. Is it a very demanding sport?
It's more than people think. I think a lot of people see you driving a car around a track and they think, well, I drive a car to the supermarket every day, and how hard can it be? The physical aspect of it is very tricky. You're very hot in the car. You're doing a lot of repetition lap after lap. So when you combine, I suppose, the physical side of it, the heat and the concentration, all those combined, are difficult to manage when you're going around a circuit like Bathurst, for instance, when you've got walls either side and you can't sort of make a mistake. And if you do make a mistake, you're probably going to pay for it. You're going to be up against a wall, or it might end your race. So there is quite a lot of emphasis on your fitness side. I have a fitness coach that looks after me, who gives me a training schedule. And probably I don't follow it as much as I should these days. But it's when I was younger, and I probably was a little bit more wound up in the car and nervous, and probably using a lot more energy in the car. I needed to be fitter and all that. But now I am very relaxed in the car. I've done it for a long time, and I find by being relaxed in the car, I can handle the physical side of it a lot better. I'm not exerting myself as much. But I always want to go into an event knowing that I've prepared myself as well as I can, and that if, your cool suit fails, or you're feeling extremely hot, or something's, not working out, that you will be fit enough, strong enough to get to the end of the race and not make errors. There is a lot that goes into the physical side of it. Generally, the cabin temperature is about 20 degrees hotter than the ambient. So, and you're doing that for, a good hour and a half at a time, probably more in some cases. So, you got your helmet on, all your fireproof underwear and suit, and obviously the engine, everything is inside the car is quite raw. There's a lot of heat coming through the car. So just that temperature, I find, is probably the trickiest thing to deal with.
I've driven the odd car here and there. I was lucky enough to drive an F1 car back in the Renault days around Paul Ricard circuit. And question for you, I was amazed. I just did 2 laps at reasonable speed, not how you would drive. One thing that stood out for me is, how do you maintain concentration? Like, I was lucky, I didn't have any other cars around me. I was just so worried about race line, braking, turning, accelerating out, gear changing at the right time, and all of the things that you just want to survive on your own. You throw in other lunatics who are trying to pass you. Some are good, some are not. How do you maintain that concentration? Because I even found it myself. There was one point I thought I was getting the apexes right, but then you just have a brain fade for once. A split second, you just don't think of something, or you're on the brakes a bit too long and you didn't come off when you start turning, and next thing you've spun the car around. How do you maintain that psychological edge all the time? Because it's so demanding.
It is very much a bit of a head game out there. And a lot of drivers now focus a lot on trying to improve their focus in the car. But I would say, to your point there, a lot of things that you're thinking about and focusing on, because I've done it for so long, I probably don't put a lot of energy into that. I know, where to place the car, where the apex is, what gear I'm meant to be in. It's all quite natural. So I've got a bit more capacity to be worrying about racing other people. But there's no doubt that there is a lot going on. And we often do ride days and things to take sponsors around the track and supporters, and they sit beside you and watch what you're doing. and it's almost like a dance, on the pedals, on the gear stick, on the steering wheel, all these things going on that we don't even, really comprehend. But there is a lot of mental energy going on that we do take for granted because we've done it so long. And I think we probably underestimate a little bit. When I work with a lot of amateur drivers that have come into racing very late, and they're trying to, fast track the whole process, and a lot of that stuff that we do naturally, they've really got to put a lot of thought into, a lot of effort. So doing exactly what you're doing, they're thinking about every little step of the way, and they don't have capacity for other things around them. But it just comes down to experience, something I've done for a very long time now. And it does surprise me even when I'm working within the business week to week, and then go and drive a race car on the weekend and switching my focus completely, and still managing to get very good results doing that. And I think it's actually helped me being part of our business because it's such a big shift from what I am doing on the racetrack. So, I have to shift my brain so much that I can really focus in on the one thing at one time. And I reckon that's what car racing does teach drivers, to be in the moment and focusing on that one task at that time, and putting all the other stuff out of your brain, and like I said, focusing on the job at hand.
And Tony, the technology, because that must have really changed over the years, especially around driver safety. I can just imagine the speeds you go at. You make one mistake and, can have catastrophic, impact. So how's that changed, or what's happened in the industry from that point of view?
I mean, the cars always develop. They get better, they get faster, they have more grip, but they also do it easier as well. We go down Mount Panorama doing 300 k's an hour, and you wouldn't think about doing that down Hoddle Street. You just think that was absurd. But doing that on a racetrack that's purpose built for it, a race car that is very finely tuned, it doesn't actually feel like you're going that fast. Mind you, if you stop in a hurry, you know that you're going fast. But yeah, the cars are so impressive. One of the cars I do race, a Lamborghini in the Bathurst 12 hour, it's got 8 levels of ABS. There's, I think, 11 levels of traction control, paddle shift. It's got all these driver aids to be able to help you drive the car better and faster and more consistent. But what that means is everyone just takes more risk and pushes harder and tries to, find the limit and get a bit more speed out of the car. But when you go back to supercars, they're very raw. So they don't have ABS, they don't have traction control. It's a manual gearbox. So it sort of comes back down to the driver's feel, how they're feeling the tyre, and you're basically the ABS system. You're the traction control with your feet. Whereas in some of these other cars that are highly technical, you can be a lot more aggressive on the throttle or on the brake pedal, because the systems in the car take over for you and make sure you get around the corner. So for the different categories that I do, they all require different driving styles. One of the categories I do is front wheel drive. Then you've got the supercar rear wheel drive, and then you've got the GT stuff, which is rear wheel drive, but it's got a lot of technology in there that allows you to drive the car really hard and really fast. But those cars, they are $700,000. They're worth $700,000, and if you do spray them down the wall, it's a very expensive day for the team. So we don't like to do that too often. But these things do happen. I mean, you are driving them to the inch of their life, and you're trying to get the last little bit out of them. And sometimes mistakes do happen, but hopefully not too often.
And as far as the team strategies, I was lucky enough in my early years. I worked for HDT back when Peter Brock had Birdie Street as special vehicles, and got to go to assist with one of the, all of us, all special vehicles guys went up to Bathurst. We did one Bathurst. But team strategies, just keen to get an understanding, how have they changed over the journey? Or is it still very much, is there still a lot of work done behind the scenes that we lay people just don't have any idea of how much is involved?
Especially when you look at like the Bathurst 1000, for instance. I raced for Dick Johnson Racing there's 50 people in the team, and there's probably 20 of them are engineers. So they'll have people working on the strategy prior to the event, your best case scenarios, and then all the if this happens, well, that's our contingency plan, and if this happens, we'll do that. But a lot of it has to be done on the fly, because as soon as the lights go out, the whole race can change, and you can't really predict that. It's never really going to go to plan. You can have weather, you can have engine problems, you can have a tyre let go. That doesn't necessarily mean you're out of the race or out of contention, but it means you've got to quickly think on your feet. So in our team, we'll have an engineer that's on the radio to me. He'll have a data engineer that's looking over all the vitals of the engine and seeing whether there's safety car, or just being his eyes basically. And then he'll have people backing him up that are looking at the engine temperatures and overall strategy and all these things. You got the team manager working with the crew to know when we're coming into pit. What's the plan for when we pit? Are we doing 2 tyres, 4 tyres? Are we doing fuel? Are we going to try and spray air the radiator out, or what are we going to do? So it is a massive team sport, and I think the drivers obviously do get a lot of the accolades. There's no doubt, but without a good car and a good team behind you, especially in these endurance races, you're not going to get a result. So my role as a co-driver at DJR is very much to be as fast as I can, as consistent as I can in the car, and hopefully bring it back without a scratch on it. So I've been able to do that for the last 8 years with those guys. But it does bring its own sort of pressure, I guess, because you can't just be driving around off the pace and letting people past and ruining your day. You do need to be racing quite hard. You do need to be consistent, not make mistakes, or the least amount of mistakes, and hand the car back to the main driver, who I race with, Anton De Pasquale, in the best possible position so they can attack and have a good car at the end of the race. So there's no point having a car that's all beaten up, and that last stint where it really sort of matters, it's not as healthy as what it could be. So there's a bit of strategy even in the car when you're racing other people. You do have to fight your own battles, and you have to assess the battle and see whether it's worth getting involved in. And as that co-driver, it's a very fine line.
There's so much to it. That is, I really appreciate that, Tony. I've been around a few years, but that is an amazing description of the industry, and it's still an eye-opener for me. That's incredible. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks for sharing with us. It's really interesting. You don't always see what's going on. I've been involved in automotive my whole life. We used to, in South Africa, we sponsored a lot of rally drivers and a lot of racing in that at Kyle Army race course and that. So we spent a lot of time there, but you still don't get involved in what you've described now. So it's really fantastic. So thanks very much for sharing it.
No, my pleasure. I think motorsport itself is an exciting sport to be involved in. You obviously got the engineering side of it and the performance side, but we've also got a lot of partners that help make it all work, a lot of sponsorship that goes into it. So you take a lot of people on the journey with you, and a lot of teams get supported by people to make it all happen. And there are a lot of people in the background that without them it wouldn't happen at all. So it's an expensive game, but it's a bit of a drug, isn't it? We've been involved a very long time, and my young fella has actually just started to do a bit of karting as well. So it's gone full circle now, and I'm not too sure whether I'm excited about it or not.
You'll be driving nationals. It's fantastic.
It's fun.
That's fantastic. It's funny, we always talk about the auto industry, and John will attest to this. We'd always say it's a numbers game, people business, but it's very much about numbers and technology, but ultimately it's people. It's the people who utilise the numbers and the technology to create something that is special. I think that is something that is unique about automotive, because you're not producing a washing machine. You don't sort of develop this new washing machine and get excited about the new spin cycle.
Someone might.
You know, but you know what I mean. You're creating something with a bit of passion, and that's it. Goes back to, you know, Al, your passion and your brother's passion to, you know, tinker with cars, fix them. You know, Tony, your passion to get these cars, drive go-karts, the Formula Fords, and then the V8 Supercars, and the other cars that you're driving as well. You know, these are cars that are, you know, they're really they make the heart race. Not as a spectator, but then you're talking about what it takes to drive them at that level for such a prolonged period of time. I think often the layperson doesn't appreciate the athleticism of a driver and just what's involved lap in, lap out. With all the variables happening around you, your machine can let you down, or it can be a fantastic machine. Other drivers around you can let you down, or they can be great drivers. The weather can let you down, or something dumb, or something crazy like a plate over a drain on the racetrack that gets sucked up by it destroys your car. So all this sort of stuff can happen.
You do learn to have to adjust a lot. Even on a single lap, for instance, you might have your ideal perfect braking marker or turning point or line or whatever, but you might just slightly brake too late, and then you just have to adjust your turning point. But you're doing all this on the fly. You know, ideally you'd like to do this, but it hasn't quite worked out. I've got to make an adjustment to still be able to get the car in the right position on track. So I suppose you have your points around a circuit that are really critical, but you're always trying to push that boundary, and you step over it so easily, or you underdo it as well. So you do learn to adjust quite well. And I have gotten better over time to not sweat the small stuff as much. So you become a little bit more relaxed with things and let a few things go.
But I think also with racing is a lot of the automotive technology has been developed through F1 and all the various racing around the world in it. And that then gets pushed through, eventually comes through into the production cars. So I think it plays a very important part of automotive, and just developing the technology and everything we do in a car.
Yeah, I mean, one of the categories that I do TCR, which is a front-wheel drive touring car category. They're based off the road car. It's a race car, but a lot of the componentry is from the road car. And I race for Honda, and it's based off the Type R. And at one of our race meetings only a few weeks ago, we actually had an issue with the car, and Honda had given me a Type R for the weekend to drive around to the track and back. And I came back in after a practice session, and the guys had got my keys and got my car, and they'd put it up on stands and actually taken the steering rack out of it, so they could get parts for the race car. So they put that in the race car, and we got the race car going, but it meant that I didn't have a road car for the rest of the weekend. One of the funny things, when we put the road car back together, every alarm under the sun had now been triggered because it had been parked. So I'm driving this car back to the airport, and, you know, all these alarms are going off at me, you know. I'm basically the car's going to explode. And the following weekend, we're at Bathurst, and one of the people from Honda drove up. I said, "Oh, what car did you drive up in?" I said, "Oh, HRV, like a little SUV." And I said, "I thought you were bringing Type R up." And she's like, "Yeah, the car had to go back because it had all these alarms going off, and I don't know what happened to it." And we were all like, I don't know what. So if they're watching this, I'm in trouble. But it just goes to show, though, that, you know, there is, a bit of a correlation between the road car and the race car in some racing categories. It's not all just purpose-built race cars, and it doesn't flow through to the road car. And yeah, perfect example of just literally pulling a part out of the road car and putting in the race car, and away we went. Right.
It's the good old days of Bathurst. Yes, absolutely. Because a lot of people don't know, they know one part of the industry, but they don't know the whole lot. Even just the motor racing side, you know, there's so many of us that in the industry go, yeah, we kind of know it, but we don't really know it. But when you have a listen to a podcast and you go, oh, so that's the story, not just the retail story that Channel 7 is going to tell. This is the story that really is behind the scenes that tells me about what it takes to be a race driver, going through the channels, what your dad had to do for you, but then you're also associated with a business. So it means that it has to make sense. It's got to fit in with life. It's not just a one-off type thing. You've actually made it an entire career, and you've now got another generation coming through. So, these are the things that put it all into perspective. And that's why if you're listening to your podcast, then listening to the business podcast, you can say, well, hang on, so here's a business story, and then right next to it's a motor racing story, but I can see how that can actually complement this. And then that can link into, say, the caravan one that we did with the guys, with Chris Pilates, and with New Age, and it's like, oh, so that's how that works, and this could do this, and that's linked to, then there's a Walkinshaw link between it all, and you can go, all right, so that's how it all works. And then, so Nissan was there, and then you were doing stuff for HSV, and then that's Walkinshaw again. So it then shows this, it's an ecosystem. It's not just one thing in isolation. And that's where we're trying to add value to basically not only just people in the industry, but people on the peripheral of the industry, so they can understand, wow, that's where that piece fits, because it's a big jigsaw puzzle. And if you take this piece out, then that doesn't work. Oh, excellent, Tony. Well, thanks for that. Really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing that amazing journey, but also just the insights that most of us were not aware of.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening. Hopefully you got as much out of the conversation with Tony D'Alberto as we did. It's great to hear the inside story from a motor racing perspective and the journey.
Thanks very much for watching. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, either on YouTube or one of our audio channels. We'll talk to you again next week.